startling revelations have been made after an income tax crackdown on top NGOs, and this is as per Indian Express report. The report cites income tax claims to say that NGOs like the Oxfam, CPR, which is the Center for Policy Research, ET, and several others which receive foreign funding have influenced activities in India. The report goes on to say that NGOs picked up causes attacking prominent business groups and they were all receiving foreign funding. The report also says that the NGOs and trusts are linked to each other, though the NGOs have denied the charge so far. Let me bring in my guests because, of course, this story has taken political color. Tuhin Sinha is the national spokesperson of the BJP. We have Tehseen Poonawala, political analyst. Manish Barrier is political analyst as well. Tuhin, one thing is becoming clear that licenses were cancelled in some cases, as the report is suggesting, but they're also acting through proxies. So there are proxy NGOs which are functioning as well. If the larger intent appears to be stalling the India growth story, and companies which are involved in the developmental projects of India, then what is the government planning to do now, particularly because it's privy to this report? I mean, this is, of course, the claim which is being made by the income tax.
Well, good evening, Maria. Good evening, everybody. The cleaning up of NGO funding has been an ongoing process for the last many years. In fact, you would recall that the FERA provisions, Foreign Exchange Regulation Act provisions, were strengthened to make sure that unknown sources of funding of these NGOs were cut, and I think many of them lost their licenses in the process. So it's an ongoing process. It has nothing to do with a particular case. But yes, the fact that some of these NGOs have been at the forefront of besmirching India's reputation, and the fact that they could be in collusion with one political party, India's principal opposition party, the fact that there is a triumvirate, if you include the short-selling agency Hindenburg, there could possibly be a triangle over here which is trying to harm India's reputation, which is trying to derail India's growth story. So I think, what we have seen is just the tip of the iceberg. I would wait for more information on the IT raids and on the IT action on these NGOs. But yes, I mean, it's an ongoing process which has happened over a period of many years. And that is one of the reasons why, many of these NGOs have lost their licenses, foreign operating, foreign funded NGOs.
Because what's becoming clear is that the NGOs, a number of them are misusing the FCRA. Tehseen, in 2010, of course, there were more teeth that was given to this entire process. The idea was that through this amendment, the cleanup will be done so that the funding which is being received by these NGOs will be for the purpose with which these NGOs are set up. Let me give you an example. Oxfam, its website talks about a particular objective. But what it has done is that it has indulged and conspired with Oxfam Australia installing a project of a company here in India.
Yeah, Maria. So this is very, very worrying, and thank you for having me on the show, because as you rightly said, the objectives of that particular NGO, that particular organization, if it's a not-for-profit company, must be met. And if those objectives are not being met and they're involving in themselves in any other activity, particularly activity that is against the interests of India, I, for one, am very conservative, and I call this economic terrorism, economic warfare. And I am surprised that the government hasn't come down harder on this. Look, we are a thriving democracy. These NGOs have a right to go to court if the government is biased. But you cannot let these NGOs go away and scuttle the Indian growth story. Let me go back to the 2008 nuclear deal. And you'll remember, Maria, and I remember you covering that very, very intensely in Parliament. That was the nuclear deal, the 123 agreement given to India when India was not a signatory of the NSG. It was an exception made by the world for India. And yet so many of these NGOs came down, funded a protest as if there was going to be a nuclear blast in India, and tried to derail what was India's moment of glory. And yet some political parties in Parliament that were perhaps involved with it. Some of them even got cash into Parliament. So this is what I am talking about. If I was the Home Minister of this country, I would come down even more hard. Economic terrorism is as bad as any other form of terrorism. I am surprised that so many of these NGOs go away. By the way, I'm a supporter of NGOs. I do think Indian government cannot reach everywhere in such a large, diverse country. NGOs are needed, but they cannot move away from their stated objective, especially with foreign collaboration. We have to be very guarded against that.
Absolutely, because I'm looking at the particular objective with which these NGOs function. You know, let me go back to that example of Oxfam. It says clearly on its website here in India, Oxfam India believes in the power of people. They work with, Adivasis, Dalits, Muslims, informal sectors, especially women and girls, to have safe, violence-free lives with freedom to speak their mind, equal opportunities, and to realize their rights. But what they are doing is stopping mining activities of a company in Australia. So there are this collusion of sorts which is happening, and with the larger objective of delisting, some kind of plan which is at play here. But Manish, come in on this. What is becoming evident, and as per this, the income tax department, as they are claiming in this report, that it doesn't really stop at activism. It doesn't really stop at, say, protests in order to stall those projects or activities. It stops also, they take it a little further in entering the domain of litigation as well. And even if the PILs are not accepted by the court, there is that entire confusion which is created, which serves the agenda.
Good evening, Mariaji, and to my co-panelists and viewers. See, this has been something which has caught the attention of the country and of the government, not only in the present regime, but even as you rightly mentioned in 2010. I think one of the biggest crackdowns started with under Manmohan Singh government itself. So, from there itself it started. Government has been very, very clear that NGOs cannot be allowed. And, the most important part is the purpose for which these NGOs have been formed. They are not actually doing the same thing. The funds are being diverted to something else. And that's the cause of concern. And that is what is the point of the government and income tax also. And as you rightly said, in fact, just to, add, many of these 5 NGOs, their directors are same, the shareholders are same, and they are basically cross-holding patterns as far as shareholding is concerned. And they've gone to courts. So it's basically, they are now aiding business rivalry. So I would say that they have gone to the extent that the intention is very clear. Otherwise, why would Oxfam Australia and Oxfam India would collaborate to ensure that Adani doesn't get or is booted out of Australia? There is no doubt over it. There are a number of NGOs who are funding. So let me add about Oxfam. So once their FCRA license was cancelled, they in fact created proxies. And the proxies started getting money, and then these money started getting. So it's very, very, vicious kind of cycle which is being there. And the government is well within its right to really crack down on these. And it's now that it is coming out in such a manner. But otherwise, really thankful to the government that really brought out this focus. But at the same time, I would agree with Mr. Tasim Poonawalla when he said that actually Indian NGOs are enough to really, do a very good job. There is internally, we are really becoming strong economically. There is a CSR of certain percentage by companies, and they are being channelized to the right NGOs.
Manish, I also want to understand one aspect, because economic growth is very essential for any country. It's also very imperative that a country becomes self-reliant. What is becoming clear as per this report is that, industrialized nations all over the world have used coal for ensuring that their economies are fueled, that their economies get that push. But when it comes to India, although it has talked about renewable energy, the same groups actually try and say that why is India indulging in the same processes?
So let me share with you, I cannot confirm, but I heard that there was an intelligence report. And that intelligence report says that there was a conspiracy to really reduce India's GDP growth rate by 2 to 3%. Now, this can only happen if India is not able to sustain itself as far as energy is concerned. And I think this is very, very concerning. So I would agree with you that, India is a rising economy. And once you rise, geopolitical reasons, the countries are going to hurt you, if not directly, indirectly. And energy is an area we all understand. That's where the entire geopolitics is played around. So it's not very surprising that what we hear about, a lot of coal fields have been really targeted, and many, even nuclear energy for that matter. One may agree, not agree, but we know that number of things were happening around nuclear energy where there were NGOs, they were actually opposing these. So therefore, this has been going for a long time, and I think it was time that these kind of activities were brought to the focus of the public as well as the government.
All right, we'll continue to have this discussion also around 8:30 p.m. So join me then.
Well,
Tehseen. Yes, Tuhin, please.
Well, if I can
just
just add.
Can I just make one point?
Yes, 30 seconds, Tuhin, quickly.
If I can just add, the government, Modi government is completely cognizant of this threat from some of these spurious NGOs. And since 2015, 16,000 NGOs have lost their licenses on account of various violations. As of April this year, the FCRA registered NGOs was 6,000 in number. But again, you have to take into account the fact that on 1st January 2022 alone, 6,000 NGOs with flawed FCRA registrations were cancelled. So we are, cognizant of the threat and going ahead. We are only going to get more,
yes, but
just one line,
just one line. Public debate also, which will be about that these NGOs are, is the government really curbing freedom of speech, expression, civil liberties? How will that be countered then? Not to you, that's for Tehseen. Tehseen?
No, listen. Freedom of speech is absolute, or nobody denies it. Freedom of life. But if you're training a girl to raise up her voice, I don't understand how you're training her to raise up her voice by blocking somebody's coal mines. That doesn't add up. If you want a girl to stand up and raise a voice, please let the NGO contact NDTV, get her to internship under Maria, under you, and she will raise her voice very well, and you will be glad to help it. You don't have to shut somebody's coal plant down. So it's a very logical thing. You can't say my objective is to help women raise their voice and then shut coal mines down. That doesn't add up. It's 2 plus 2, and if 2 plus 2, this government wants to patent back and says 22, then I think this government's living in fool's paradise. And
what's becoming evidently clear is there is a great degree of duplicity in the functioning of these NGOs. So thank you so much for joining us, Tuhin, Tehseen and Manish.